Hello, everyone. I am so excited to have Chanel Brenner with us today to talk about grief coaching and all that she does. I'm also here with Darcy Meehan, one of the coaches and director of outreach for Hirschman Clinical Services. I'm the owner of. We do great coaching work with folks with mental health, eating disorders, and substance abuse issues. We're mobile and go into the community to help people post treatment and integrate various life skills into real time. We're out of Missouri, Kansas, and California now. So excited about that. And we are also launching this creative healing membership where you can find this video and other videos and join our community on Tuesdays and all sorts of things. So please check that out. And with all of that said, I'm going to pass the baton to Darcy, who's going to introduce the lovely Chanel.
Thank you, Michelle. Hi, all. I am so grateful to be here and really honored to introduce Chanel Brenner to all of you, all of us. We'll be able to find out a lot more about her experience and grief coaching and writing in a couple of minutes. I really just want to honor her experience and share some of it now. So, Chanel Brenner is a poet and essayist, offering one-on-one grief support through writing. She's the winner of the 2021 Press 53 Award for Poetry for Smile or Else, and the author of Vanilla Milk, a memoir told in poems. Definitely something I want to read. She began writing poetry when her older son Riley died of a brain AVM hemorrhage at age 6. Writing quickly became her lifeline. She believes everyone can benefit from writing to help process their grief and navigate life after loss. So in this conversation, that's some of what we'll be hearing about and exploring together. And I'm going to pass it back to Michelle and open it up to Chanel.
Yay, wonderful. Well, I had the opportunity to meet Chanel, God, 8 years, Chanel, maybe?
Think so. I think it's
Yeah,
yeah.
in about 8 years. Um, at a memoir writing class where we were consistently going together for many years. She stayed in it. I didn't, but I was just always in awe of her when she read her pieces. It was just like, I want to be like her when I grow up in the writing world.
I felt the same way when I heard your pieces. So
Oh gosh.
true. And I'm in that room, where it
Yes,
all
yes, she was.
happens.
Yes, you were hosting the lovely memoir writing coach in your space. That was made it even more magical and special. Yeah. So we share a lot of really great memories together. And if you haven't picked up her poetry books, you've got to. They're beautiful. So definitely Google Chanel Brenner and we'll get all your information on the website for you. But I am super curious because over the last, I think it's been a couple of years, you've been launching this grief coaching work and integrating these worlds of writing and grief work. And I'd love to hear a little bit more, um, obviously about what inspired you, and then and actually, then we'll get into the practical. But let's start with the what inspired you to start this.
Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah, when I recently started launching it and doing it, I had been searching on my computer and realized that it was like five, 5 or so years ago, even longer, where I had already had like the seeds of it, had started doing writing prompts, and I had even called it writing through loss, writing through child loss. Um, and I think I was feeling like my poetry, although I felt like I was connecting with people who had experienced loss, it didn't feel like I was connecting. It was just hard to connect with them fully with my books. And I felt like I heard a lot of people say to me that my writing was so powerful and they loved it, but they couldn't write like me. And so that was a lot of, so I was like, no, you can. And, if you're given the right writing prompt, a good writing prompt, you can write and it is beneficial. And I think a lot of times that people really can surprise themselves. And that's what I love the most is that if you have a good writing prompt, even if you think you're not a writer, that you can write something that's brilliant and just be like, oh my gosh, I wrote that. And and yeah, I mean, so I think that's what inspired me the most was just people saying like, I can't write like that, and just not being able to experience how healing and how much writing has helped me for them not to feel like they had access to that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Um, and I could speak to that as well because I was never like a writer before I went to that memoir writing class, and sometimes with the right prompts, it can really help things flow.
Yeah.
So that's beautiful. Okay, so all of this starts percolating. Can you share with us what it looks like when someone enters a session with you?
Yeah. So at the beginning of a session, it is very much just talking about, what's been going on with them. Just kind of like, what's been kind of coming up this week? Just connecting with where they're at in their grief and their life. But it's a small portion. The conversation is a small portion.
Mhm.
And then it quickly gets into the writing because the connecting and the work is really in the writing and the writing prompt.
Mhm.
So I would start with it's the prompts that I do have a few steps. So I'd start with like the first one, which usually is something with creating images. So the first step would be like maybe 3 to 5 minutes where they would just jot down some keywords, images, that kind of thing.
Mhm.
And then we do a step two, which is going to maybe be a question or something emotionally connected. And I can give you examples too if you're curious. And then I would share a poem. So I would read a poem, and then I would give them the actual writing prompt to do. And then for the actual writing prompt, they would probably spend about 15 to 20 minutes writing during the session.
Mhm.
And then after that, if they're comfortable, they could share what they wrote. And
Mhm.
then we would discuss it, and I would comment on it and what stood out, or just how it felt for them.
Mhm.
Um, if they're not comfortable sharing, that's fine too, because they can just talk about what the experience was and talk about what part of what they wrote about. So it's optional. Because I know sometimes there can be pressure with writing. You feel like, sharing it's kind of challenging at first. And I also offer if you feel like just sending it to me in a written form too, and I'll comment that way.
Well, I love the openness with that because it's also something they could utilize with their own therapist or other providers that they might be working with, in
Yeah.
addition to
Yeah,
like that different levels of feedback. Um,
definitely.
I think that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's great. So they leave actually with some writing, not only writing prompts, but potentially some pieces of writing.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Do you want to give us like one prompt that
Yeah.
you do?
Yeah. I would love to. Yeah, I have one. I'm like right here just in case.
Yeah,
So,
let's do it.
yeah.
Like what would it?
Um, okay. So this one is called Personify Your Grief.
Okay.
Okay. And so this one is kind of some of these I think of in relation to different, the chakras. And
Mhm.
this one's kind of around the root chakra, like being grounded. Because with grief, it just completely like uproots you, like, And so this one, for the first step, you're going to make a list using the five senses in this moment right now. So you'd write, what do you see? What do you taste? Which is always interesting. Like right now, it's just the coffee I had still from a few minutes ago. The taste one, you could imagine what you ate last.
Mhm.
What do you hear? What do you feel? And what do you smell? So that's actually in this moment. So
Wow.
that's step one. And then, so part two is what are some of the things you used to do with your person before they died?
Hmm.
So, and this one, yeah, I was trying, there's a more open version of it, but it could be regarding like a loss in your life. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a person. It could be like the end of a marriage. You can fill that in with something else. Um, yeah. So what are some of the things you used to do before the loss? And then I have a poem. The poem is one of mine. It's called Raising Grief. Did you want me to read it or do you want? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
please.
Okay. So this is from my second book from Smile or Else, and it's called Raising Grief. Morning was born, colicky, wet-eyed. Trying to console her, sleep deprived, I pushed her in a stroller, tried every octave. Those first years bled nights, falling asleep with her in my arms, breathing in unison, protecting the fontanelle on her fragile head. Now I know to feed her sweet bread and help her soothe when she seethes. Before she runs off to climb a tree, she nuzzles me on a park bench, swinging her legs like a 4-year-old. So, for the actual writing prompt, it's to write a poem or a piece of writing, imagining grief as a character. What kind of voice does she have? How has she grown or changed? How have you grown or changed in response? Try to incorporate some sensory image from A and the activities from part B.
Wow. God, that's so powerful.
And so it also kind of teaches you or shows you a way to do the tool personification, the writing tool, which I feel like is a very powerful, something that's very healing to do with writing is to personify your emotion, give your emotion a character. It's a different way to look at it,
Oh, yeah.
you know.
So
Yeah.
you hold a lot of space. I mean, because I have to believe there's a lot of emotions that come with reading out loud.
Yes. It's a whole different level, as you know, when you write something and then when you actually share it,
Yeah.
right? Which I think is part of the healing, part of that part of what I needed to do too. Just writing it in a vacuum and a void would feel very isolating. But to be able to share your writing is just a whole different level.
Absolutely. The vulnerability and release.
Yeah, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. And I
Um,
think the creating something, you don't want to just, you create something and it's something you offer. It's not something you just like hide away. You know what I mean?
right. Yeah. No, no. You can, well, and there's so many great rituals you can do with that writing too, depending on how people are attaching to it. If they're gonna burn
Yeah,
it, if they're gonna make it into a
totally.
book.
Yeah, right. There's so many things. And I think that even if you aren't somebody that's going to put together a poetry collection, you could always put together a book that you share with friends and family and people that love that person. It's a way to connect with, other people who love that person, which I
Actually, an
love.
idea that just came to mind, Chanel, was like with all of your clients, if they were open to it, to like even compile some pieces.
I had thought about that. I thought that would be a really cool thing to do at some point. Yeah.
Yeah,
If
that'd be
people were
really,
even if they had pieces that they loved that they wanted to share to create
yeah.
kind of
I was
book.
inspired
Yeah.
with the work that you did. I would
Yeah. I love
be
that.
really curious, especially with your prompts. They're so powerful. People would want to read it from different lenses.
I know, right? Yeah. And I love seeing that's one of my favorite things is to see what people do with the prompts and how unique it is.
Mhm.
And sometimes they're afraid of doing it wrong. Like, I didn't do this right, or I didn't follow the instructions. And I'm always like, just follow where the muse takes you. There's no right or wrong, you
Mhm.
know. You don't have to follow exactly. You just feel you do what your intuition tells you to do when you write. And if it tells you to go this direction, go that direction. There's no right or wrong. It's just for inspiration.
Absolutely. Well, and I find this is such a creative support for folks that are grieving because some of the traditional models, like you just get stuck in therapy. Like, what are you going to talk? I mean,
Yeah.
sometimes, yeah, you need to talk about it over and over, but this kind of puts you in a different part of your brain that can process things in a different way and sometimes can help heal. Um,
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. And it took me a long time to figure out what it was. Like for the longest time, I was like, I don't know why I'm doing this. I just can't stop writing and I feel better because of it. And I didn't really understand what was so healing about it. And I've learned that's been a journey too, of learning about that, why it's healing and yeah, the different aspects of it. Yeah.
Can I add something real quick, or at least interject? With me, I lost my mom in June. Sorry.
I'm so sorry.
I've gone to therapists and the grief groups, and they just want to talk about the negative. And for me, I want to stay focused on how long I did have her and how grateful I am. So being able to write, I can express what I'm feeling and not have this therapist constantly go back to the negative part, or the group just always wanting to dwell on the loss. Yes, I know I've lost her, but I want to focus on how blessed I am and how long I did have her. And that's where the writing allows me to be me. So
Yeah.
I like hearing what you're saying. So thank you.
You're so welcome. And I love that, because that's exactly how I feel. I think that when you're writing, you're focusing on all the joyful moments and who they were in their life, and all that, not focusing on just, the negative. That's how I feel about crying too. Like for me, when I cry, I feel like it's almost like writing negative things in a journal. Like I just feel like it's so, like, I don't know, it doesn't make me feel better. That's why I turned to the writing. It is more positive. It's creating hope, and you create your future, not like, not getting stuck in the grief and stuck in the past, right? Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah.
Um, yeah, I'm super curious. I mean, I know a lot about your background, but for those out there, are you open to sharing a little bit about your journey, how you connected to writing to begin with, that launched this
Yeah.
practice of yours?
Yeah. So, I truthfully, like, from a very young age, I always wanted to be a writer. And I ended up studying journalism, but then I didn't get a job in writing. And then I worked in the computer industry for a long time. And when my oldest son, Riley, was about a year and a half, 2 years old, I all of a sudden got a calling to take a writing class that's here in Los Angeles with the poet and playwright Jack Grapes, who's an amazing teacher. And I did the method writing workshops with him. And I had a calling. I remember looking out in my backyard, and my husband and my son were running around. And I was just like, I have to take this class. Like, it was just a calling. And I yelled to my husband, I'm going to take this writing class. He's like, okay. So I started the class, and I started writing about motherhood, really. I was writing and just dealing with, for me, motherhood was a little challenging. It didn't feel very natural to me. So I struggled with the whole process and like the frustrations of motherhood. So I wrote a lot about that at first. And then, so I was in the workshop when my son Riley died. So when he was 6 years old, he died from a brain AVM hemorrhage. We found out about the brain AVM when he was 5 and had his first bleed. And it was inoperable because it was in a dangerous part of the brain and also too large to operate on. So we lived about a year and a half with that knowledge. And then when he died, I was actually in the writing workshop, and I started writing poetry. And actually, the night that he died, I sat down at the computer and started to write a poem. And because it was basically like, am I going to just start screaming and like throwing things and pulling my hair out? Or am I going, no, it's like, right. I heard a voice in my head that just said, right. So I sat down and I wrote a very bad poem. Even to this day, I'm like, oh my God, that was like the worst poem ever. But I wrote, and it just led to many more poems. And so then my first book, Vanilla Milk, is literally all the first 2 years of poems. It's like just all of the raw grief. And I just continued to write. And my second collection is kind of the next like 4 years after that. So it's just ongoing grief. And I'm still writing. And I think I went all over the place, but is it?
No, it's clear. No, it's amazing. I mean, I'm glad that you had that process and now you can share it with the world, because I think it's underutilized. I don't think people are seeing the power of being able to put pen to paper with powerful prompts that you've come up with in your own journey.
Yeah. And
our soul.
I was really inspired by other books of poetry and writings on people who'd lost children. Like for me, that was really comforting. Like I know some people are different. Some people it's too much to read right away, but that for me like was really inspiring to see what people wrote about, like these deep emotions, or like I'm trying to think of an example. Like yeah, there's this writer Shelley Wagner who wrote this book called The Andrew Poems, and that was like one of my favorite books that I read, and it was about her son that drowned when he was like I think 5 years old. And you know, she would write even about the things she was guilty about, because there's a lot of, you know, guilt and regret around grief. I shouldn't say a lot, but I feel like everyone has something. And she would just write about some of those moments of guilt or regret. And I just be so vulnerable. And I loved that. And so that's what, you know, I really wanted to do with my book too, is to write about those honest moments, you know.
Does it help with, I'm going to use a clinical term just because of my background, like emotional regulation, because grief can be so consuming, right? It's like sits in your throat and like random crying outbursts, hit sideways. Do you find like the writing does help kind of people?
Yeah. And that's, you know, that's interesting because I think that because I'm trying to think of the easiest way to explain this. I tried EMDR for the first time about a year and a half ago. And I was surprised at how similar writing is to EMDR, how you make connections. And so it was like, oh, this is just like writing. And then I was realizing that what I was doing when I was writing was similar to that. And also then I would write and I would walk, which is was it bilateral stimulation? Yeah. And so I would write and walk, write and walk, write and walk. So, and I still do that. And I wouldn't just sit at a computer and write. I would sometimes write in my head and come back on a walk and write in a journal. And so for me, that was, I think, emotionally regulating. And I just didn't realize it. It's kind of, you know, because sometimes when I would write, if I dive into a trauma, I'm writing about the night he died or something, I would feel the shaking and the trauma come up. And I think it's always beneficial to do other energy type work like Reiki or, you know, I don't know, I'm trying any kind of like energy healing is really helpful too, because I found that really helped my nervous system.
Acupuncture probably.
Acupuncture, exactly. Anything like that is really helpful. Yeah. Meditations, even just doing your own meditations, breath work. Yeah.
Right on. That's awesome. Were you going to say something, Beth? No. Okay. Darcy, do you have any thoughts?
I'm so grateful for the transparency about how the human experience that can't be planned and can't be controlled can be worked with and how creativity is really, I mean, it seems like the only conduit, like the only really reliable channel to deal with the things that are so unpredictable and that can feel like a wave that, in my experience, grief is like a wave that takes me down and it can pull me from under, you know, in moments that, you know, it doesn't matter how much preparation I do, you know, it blindside me. And I've shared the experience of writing, you know, some of what you've talked about, and I can feel how grounded you are and like the surrender of the overwhelming experience. And I think that's something that, like in your bio and what you shared with clients, that everybody can benefit from. One thought, and I suppose turn it into a question that I have, is how you've been able to support and maybe even affirm clients that have come in who don't feel inspired, who don't have any desire to feel inspired, but want relief from some of the emotional pain they're in, and how that can be approached. Because I definitely as a more creative person, I like the idea of being inspired. And when I've been in periods, around or following significant loss, it's no way in hell it was going to happen. And that only added pressure to me that it's like I need to kind of create momentum here when I feel like I'm as lost as the person who's gone. I'm just wondering how you would support somebody who's really in the depths, but is opening up and asking for guidance and to be led.
Yeah, I think I have experienced that with people. I think that meeting them where they're at, like sometimes, when I've had people, they've really just wanted to even just rant, like, they just need to like unload everything. So I just provide a safe space and just listen and just, and then I feel like sometimes that brings about the inspiration, then they're ready. Sometimes you need to get it out first, and I would even promote just, there's nothing wrong with writing a rant too, like, about everything you're feeling and getting it out before creativity, sometimes you need that. And I think that yeah, and in regards to like not feeling creative and not feeling like you can write, I'm surprised always by what people do come up with, regardless, even if they're not feeling inspired, if they're not worried about it being good and just going with the process and just being like, I'm just gonna write whatever comes up. I feel like everyone will do something and benefit by it in some way, you know? Yeah. If that makes sense. I think one time I was in a group where I was subbing in for a grief group, and a lot of the people were resistant to it, and they admitted they were resistant to writing. And then they ended up sharing parts of the prompt, like the list. And I remember a couple of them they connected even on that. Oh, I had the table as my broken thing too. Oh, I had the table. So they connected around even just like one step of the prompt, which I thought was cool.
Sounds like the prompts themselves can create something really tangible, and that can be
Yeah.
so incredibly grounding. That maybe
Yeah.
not comforting, but grounding, which is beneficial.
Yeah, I agree with that. And that's why I do feel like for me, as much as I can, I want it to be through the writing, the connecting. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Is there any experience that you've had either personally or with somebody else that kind of highlights just why you do this, why you show up in this way as a guide? Because I know it's got to come with trade-offs. It's a lot of energy to hold, a lot of service is required. So what's inspired you to keep going?
Riley, my son. Yeah. Yeah. I feel like he's with me. I feel like he's guided me this way. And yeah, I feel it's really who I am. It's not even, I just feel like it's the most meaningful thing that I can do with my life. Like, I just feel like it's very authentic to my experience, and it's a gift, and it's something that he through the loss, I became a whole new person, and I'm just grateful that I'm who I am now because of him. And yeah. I don't know if I answered it, but that's yeah.
I appreciate what you said about the bilateral stimulation and balancing writing and then walking or moving or doing something, because if I'm just writing, I can just sit in that and be in a lot of sadness, and the reminder to get up and move, just do something, just, change that energy, because it's really easy to just be sad.
Yeah, it is. And I would walk and cry sometimes, just we'll walk and cry, because the movement helps. And look at the trees or look at the sky and just get out, if you can get outside, I feel like it's always so grounding and also just, yeah, mood elevating. Like it helps you, pulls you out of that like deep, like, grief. Yeah. Yeah.
But it's good to hear it and remember. I wrote it
Yeah. I'm glad
down.
you already do that and that, yeah. Yeah. Totally. Did we lose Michelle or is she still there?
It looks like we did, so I have a feeling she'll pop
Pop
back
back,
in.
pop, yeah.
It's like the mystery of the virtual.
I know, I know.
So Chanel, do you have writing classes? I'm sorry if I missed that part. My Verizon switched over to a different text thing and I
Oh,
still
that's
don't have it. I
okay.
thought that was more important.
Yeah, in probably I started doing them recently, doing writing through loss workshops, and I started doing first round was writing through child loss. So I had a child loss group. I think in this probably spring I'm going to offer a writing through loss, like a general loss group, because I had some people interested in it. So I would definitely, yeah, share that with you if you're interested.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. They're going to be small groups, like probably like around 5 people. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Um, oh, I was going to say, do you want me to read any more poems or do you want me to share anything else?
I would love to hear another poem. And then if you're open to share about your experience of grief before this really significant loss, like how it's changed, because there's different types of grief, and not everyone will be able to relate to one type or
Yeah.
how it comes, right? The
Yeah.
person, place, or thing. But
Yeah.
just any more about your experience with grief would be really valuable if you're open to share.
Okay, yeah, definitely. And actually it is, yeah, important to share. So I actually had a lot of loss in my life before my son Riley died. So my dad died of ALS when I was 30, right when I was getting married. And I had my brother, he's a half brother. So, because I'm come from a divorced family, my half brother died when he was 16 from a car accident. So those are pretty big losses. And it's interesting because I didn't handle them in the same way. I didn't deal with them. Just put it that way. My brother died when I was in my 20s and I didn't know what to do with I got tons of anxiety and I didn't even realize that it was because of that. And I didn't understand what was going on. And then when my dad died, I was in the process of getting married. I just fallen in love and I was trying to have kids. And I had ended up with excruciating back pain and was had like chronic back pain for years. And it was really because I wasn't dealing with the grief. So after Riley died and I was dealing with writing, all of that stuff started coming through. And my dad came up in my book and my writing and I started processing a lot of the grief I hadn't processed before. Yeah. I don't know if that answers the exact question you were asking, but yeah.
It
It does
highlights
bring
so
up a
much.
good point though, because when you have a current or recent loss, it does give you the opportunity to, at least for me, to kind of revisit, and maybe there's places I haven't tapped into or faced or looked at for the previous losses.
Yeah.
I tend to keep going. That's my
Yes.
that's my method of coping, is just keep like Dory, keep swimming. But
I hear you. That's me too. Yep.
yeah, but when there is a recent loss, it gives you the opportunity to look at some of the other ones that maybe needed a little more attention.
Yeah. And I think that you're always, grief doesn't end. I do believe that it's just ongoing. So it just kind of, when you have a new loss, it does tap into the grief that you already still carry for those other people. in whatever way, if it's left more disorganized with them or you haven't worked through, but I feel like it does surface and add to it, Yeah. I know
did
I
have
lost oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say I had one good takeaway from my grief group, and it made me laugh in a time I needed a laugh. But the leader said, "Yeah, that's the thing about death. We keep going, and they just keep being dead. So yeah, the grief doesn't go away. It's always there, but it's different. For me, it's different. Like sometimes every day, every minute, and I don't dwell in it, but I definitely have it, and I want to feel my feelings. I don't want that's important for me, but it's also a lot. So the writing, I'm looking forward to writing more. I've written, but not as much as I keep promising myself I'm going to do. So this is a great reminder. So
that makes me happy. Definitely keep on writing, because it sounds like it's something that you gravitate towards already. So yeah. Well, I can read a poem if you want me to. I don't know which one I'm going to read. Let's see. So this is my second book, Smile or Else. And yeah, I think I'm just going to read one of the beginning ones. Oh, Michelle's back. Hi. I was going to read a poem, but anything you want me to do?
That sounds great.
Okay. All right. So this one, we never heal, just remember less. Stretching my legs after a walk down our old street, my dead son's face came to me. The scar below his left eyebrow, the window of his missing 2 front teeth. So clear, I had to sit for a minute on someone else's porch. 4 years since Riley died, since the tsunami hit Japan, all those children swept away. You'd think we'd heal. Yet today, at our younger son's game, as Desmond raced toward home, his father cheered, "Go, Riley!" We stared at one another, seeing our first son fall all over again, skull of memory cracked open against concrete. It's kind of what we were just talking about, the grief, how it's just still there and it just like surfaces. Yeah.
Well, how did that feel in that moment? Well, how does it feel reading that poem now in this moment?
It always surprises me. It's always like a surprise, like it was when I heard him yell his name, Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, grief is such a fabulous, interesting within all of ourselves, it's like building that relationship with it instead of battling it, it can be a really beautiful and powerful ride to be on.
I agree. Yeah.
And I'm glad that you're there to hold space, and kind of like what Darcy was saying earlier about the creative space of utilizing supports like yours to continue. It's not going to go away. Like grief doesn't just evaporate, right? It'll hit sideways, and being able to have all of these, being able to have the writing available can be just so powerful for people. So thank you for doing what you're doing.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was thinking about the people out there when I had a bunch of questions people were asking me. Is there any specific type of client that this service may not be good for or may not be ready for? Has that happened where you're like, they're day one, like if they just found out somebody passed versus someone that's months later? Have you had any experiences with that?
I think that one thing I've heard is that I think it is like sometimes a grief group in the early stages of a loss some people that might be more ready for just a talking grief group, but I do feel like over time you could still like this kind of writing would be good for ongoing grief too. Whereas you might be done with a grief group, but you want to, feel like you want still something. I think it's a good option. I think it depends on the person. It's just a grief is so unique and it's such an individual thing. And some people might be ready sooner than others for it, you know? Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah.
And how long do people usually work with you for?
Um, it varies. I mean, like probably I would say generally under a year, like for most. Like I've had, for like maybe 8 months, 6 months average. It just depends. Yeah.
And would someone do it weekly,
They
bi-weekly,
could do
monthly?
weekly or they could do, yeah, or whatever works, but
Yeah.
weekly or monthly, I think is good, or every couple weeks.
I like the flexibility because there might just be weeks of pause and then
Yeah, and that's okay too. Like sometimes, like I've had people come and then take breaks and then come back. It just depends.
yeah, it's like Reiki and other types of healings. You don't need that every week.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, as needed, definitely. Yeah.
And what's the best way for people to reach you?
Chanel at chanelbrenner.com. Just my website is chanelbrenner.com and my email is chanel at chanelbrenner.com. So
People can schedule with you online.
I don't have, they would have to email me. I don't at this point, I probably will at some point, but I don't have like a sign up, like a schedule online. So, but they could just email me and let me know they're interested. Yeah.
Do you think you'll ever host some groups?
Well, I will. I'm going to do an open group, an open workshop in the spring, like I've been doing for writing through child loss.
Okay.
I was going to do one. I think I'm going to do one in the fall, writing through child loss again, and then just writing through loss in the spring.
Oh, great. Okay. And they can
And it'll probably be like a series of probably I'm debating, but around 4 to 6 weeks, probably like an hour a week workshop kind of thing
okay.
on
And
Zoom.
and the dates and stuff can be found on your website too.
Yeah, I haven't put the new dates up yet, but yeah, I will. Yeah.
Amazing. That would be so great. I love the idea of bringing this together with groups of people.
I'm excited. I'm excited to open it up after doing the writing through child loss one. I was getting a lot of interest in it, and it's like I feel like it would be really, yeah, good experience.
Yeah, and I think it's different than some of these traditional grief therapy or grief counseling type groups. It's just different, and not everyone can tolerate um,
Yeah.
traditional models. And I think that writing can be a really powerful element for people to get things out where it's not always just talking out loud.
I agree. And I feel like it is like having it structured through the writing, it just creates organic connection. And I think it's a good option to, the regular groups, which are great too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Adjunct. You were kind of referencing that, Beth, were you? Yeah, you're on right.
Yeah.
Is there any other questions, you guys, before we wrap this up? No.
I just want to say thank you, Michelle, for organizing this, and Chanel for being vulnerable and so your loss is more than everything, and it's just tremendous that you're sharing and helping others get through their grief and helping yourself at the same time. But it's a big deal to just share, it's healing, but it's also everything in my opinion. It's just everything, putting yourself out there. And for me, I very much always take, I'll just deal with it. But some things you just need to share, it's just a lot, and it's so helpful to be able to you know, to see people continue, with such a monumental loss, it gives me hope. I'm in a lot of gratitude, but it's still a lot of loss. But we just get through. We endure. We find the joy. Continue to live. We're here. We're blessed to be here. So I just appreciate everybody here today and everything that you're putting out here. So thank you, and for being here.
Yeah. Thank you so much. That means a lot. And I thank you for sharing and being here too today. Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you, Michelle and Darcy.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Chanel. And thank you, Beth, for showing up and joining us today. That was a gift.
Yeah.
Thank you. I don't know how the thing and how I all of a sudden appeared. I just kept pressing buttons.
Oh,
Technology.
Thank you very, very much.
You guys
Appreciate
have
it,
a great
Michelle.
day. Thank you.
Yeah.
Guys, you're welcome.
Right.